Yeah. And the call to order. So thank you all for being here. And I will do roll call. We have someone ready to take attendance. In your attendance. Okay. So Jackie, we'll go through open space first. So Chair Jacqueline Thomas, your co-chair Bruce Fox, here. Commissioner Mary Norton, here. Commissioner Molly Joyce, here. Commissioner Lena Mullen, here. Commissioner Nat White, and Councilmember Seth. Here. Thank you. Recreation Commission Chair Stephen Parkins, here. Co-chair Austin Kerr, Commissioner Neil Fraser, here. Commissioner Autumn McLeod, here. Commissioner Ryan Martin, Commissioner Jill Christensen, here. Commissioner Josh Stackhouse, here. Council Representative Garcia.
Here online.
Hello. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, sorry I couldn't be there with you guys today.
Okay. Annie, can you please the transcript? It's the little X on the top right of the screen. I'm gonna distract me. Sorry. And Chairperson, could you please remember the acknowledgement? Thank you. And read back to that, Commissioner Kerr. Sorry, right. So approval of the minutes, we thought it would be better. The joint meeting, you will each approve your minutes at your next meeting individually, so that we don't need to go through that. Are we hearing? Is everyone hearing? Okay, I'm not sure. Can you hear me now? Anyone?
Sort of. It sounds like you're underwater.
That sounds better.
Is it better now?
Maybe not.
Because I don't want to like this. Can we take a quick break to try to adjust volume?
Yeah, so we're able to hear each other out here online, but we're not able to hear you guys. It sounds like you're underwater.
I wanted to say that, but
You didn't want to say that joke.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, you sound so good now.
Oh, I'm sitting in front of the speaker. Can you talk? Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Perfect, leave it open.
We're gonna go like that then. Councilmember Garcia, this is Amy Hagan. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're gonna try this. We'll see how it goes. Gonna put this in here so that we don't lose it. Okay, so can you hear me?
Perfect.
All right. So what I was saying was for approval of minutes, each commission will take care of approving their last set of minutes at their next regular meeting. And at this time, we are up to public comment, and I will turn it over to Chair Jacqueline Thomas.
This portion of the meeting is for items that are not on the agenda. The commission cannot act on items presented during the public participation of the agenda. The commission is prohibited by the open meeting law from discussing or considering the item until the item is officially placed on an agenda. Please limit comments to 5 minutes. Do we have any public comments in the room? Do we have any public comments online? Doesn't sound like we have any public comments. So I will move on to the business items. We have A, which is Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Capital Improvement Project Plan update and discussion. So the discussion item is for the two commissions to discuss a capital improvement project plan.
So I'm going to actually kick us off first. Can we share the tally results of the open spaces prioritization review? Can you share that, Robert? Okay, thank you, Robert. So we did not get to review with the Open Spaces Commission at their last meeting the results of their prioritization exercise. So if Parks and Rec, you can, hopefully you'll enjoy this information, but this is kind of the drum roll moment for our Open Spaces Commission. This was in your packet with the last meeting and this meeting. But we wanted to make sure that we reviewed this with you because this information is exactly what rolled into us creating the 5-year plan that we're getting ready to go over. So that's the connection here. Parks and Rec Commission did this same exercise just a few years before you. And so for new Parks and Rec commissioners, you might pay attention because this will probably need to go through an exercise like this in a year or two. To make sure that we're still meeting the needs of the community. So the top priority from the prioritization exercise for the Open Space Commission was the Picture Canyon toilet. Super exciting project, evidently. It's actually, so we did want to remind the commission, we do have a 1 or 2 portable toilets, 1 portable toilet out there. It is ADA accessible. So that is there, but this project would hook us up to permanent water and sewer and provide a permanent toilet, unless we could figure out a way to do something like a composting toilet, but that has its own challenges. So that was the top priority. As you can imagine, that's a very expensive project. So what I'll go through when we're reviewing our projects is where we were able to plug this in based on allowing funds to accumulate over a certain amount of time while still addressing some of our other priorities, which you will see here. McMillan Mesa Trail rehabilitation came up second. And let me know if you have any questions about what these projects were, or if you need reminders. Happy to do that. The Picture Canyon Foots connection was third, and I'll just do the top 5. The Observatory Mesa Trail Plan implementation was next, and then Schultz Creek Trailhead was the 5th. We tried to focus on the top 10 priorities so you can see how those round out Robert, if you can scroll down just a tad.
Sure.
So those are your top 10.
Rebecca,
Yes.
ask, what do the numbers mean that are up there?
So the first column of numbers,
Is
that the total? Yeah, so that's the total of all commissioner scores for that project.
How many commissioners voted?
There were 6 or 7 at the time. Yeah, I can't remember. We can look up those details. But what we did, just like Parks and Rec did, each project, we asked commissioners to give it a score of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest priority. And then we combined all the scores, and that's what gave us these totals that you see here.
Why are some green and not green?
That's my own notes. I was looking at my some coordinations, looking at all the clear.
It means nothing to us.
And these are really Robert's and Sylvia's projects. Is there anything that you'd like to add on this before we get into the 5-year plan?
Happy to provide extra input if you guys have any questions about it. Yeah, probably good.
And we also sent this out to the open space stewards, and that's the column to the right hand side.
For those that might not have been able to hear that, the column on the right is, we also sent this prioritization exercise out to our open space steward, which is our volunteer base.
Which one did they, obviously they scored?
That's column D there. And so the green is actually where the two overlapped, like the groups overlapped. So that's kind of, I was just looking at that. Right?
It looks like their top priority, if I'm reading this correctly, was the observatory mesa fencing.
Yes, yeah, down below is like the ranking for our.
Which was a lower ranking from the commission. Okay. Any questions, especially from open space, before we move on into 5-year planning? All right. Let's talk money. So we also have our amazing and awesome accountant, Ann Thompson, is on with us today. She can help with any truly technical questions that might arise. Thank you, Ann, for being here today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And Robert and Amy will also jump in and help me out with details, correct me where I mess up. And but here's what I want to do first. Can we make that any kind of bigger? I don't know if you can. There we go. Okay. So what I want to do first is review with you how 5-year plans are put together. So you'll see and I'm just going to go back to basics so that we are all on the same page as we look at these moving forward. So you start with the sources of funds, which is your revenues, which includes a beginning fund balance, and then the revenues that come into this fund. What we have is the BBB recreation portion of the BBB tax, which, thank you all, recently got reapproved, and we are super excited about that. It will now sunset in 2043, I think. It's after I retire, so I just know that we're good for a while for these folks to continue the wonderful projects that we are starting now. So you start with revenues at the top. Further down in the spreadsheet, you will see the expenses. You can see those here on the bottom. And then at the very bottom, you will see the total fund balance at the end. Okay, so it's a basic balance sheet, if you will, but let's look at our revenues first. So this is our main source of revenue, is that BBB tax. The recreation, and I'm saying that with air quotes, portion of that is 30% of that total tax. It is split between 5 programs, recreation getting the largest share. Open space commissioners, and actually I think we took this to Parks and Recreation as well. Before we took that to the ballot, to ask for a renewal in November, we went through some code changes ahead of time. So in that spring and summer, before we took this to the voters, we asked to update the language. We didn't update the title, BBB Recreation. That is still the title of our allocation. But we did update the language to include open space along with parks and recreation amenities and facilities and land acquisitions that this money can be used for. As such, now in the Open Space Commission's code or your directive from council, the things that you're supposed to be focusing on, it now mirrors what was in Parks and Recreation Commission's directive about the BBB recreation funding and how it is used. So this meeting is super important because this is probably the most important vote that you have of the year, because you're approving, hopefully, the budget that we're presenting to you, which then gets rolled into the city manager's budget, which then gets presented to council in April, and then hopefully gets adopted in June. So that's kind of big picture why I really want you to care about staring at these numbers on a screen. So you can see here, it's a 5-year plan. We also have years 6 through 10 programmed as well. And when we start to talk about our projects, you'll start to see that. You can see that BBB tax is bringing in a good amount of money. Oh, sorry, Amy, I'm still on revenues. Yep. That BBB tax is doing really well, and we anticipate that it will continue to do well. We can really thank our friends in Economic Vitality for the strength of this fund, because without them, we wouldn't have as many tourists that come in and pay the hotels, the campgrounds, the short-term rentals, the restaurants, the bars, those things that fund this. So the next time we get annoyed, perhaps let's be thankful that they are here. We also get investment earnings, which you see here. And then that intergovernmental, that's the city's phrase or word for grants. And that grant, we will talk about later, I think was possibly related to Ponderosa Park. So any question on the revenue sides of it or how the spreadsheet is set up? I'm seeing glazed eyes already. Awesome. Let's move down and talk about expenses, because this is the exciting stuff. So you will see this just rolled up. You won't see necessarily in this version the specific projects, but these are totals. So that capital line there under expenditures, that's all the capital projects that we're getting ready to go through. You can see that with this fund, we are able to budget approximately $3 million in capital projects for parks, recreation, and open space. This is so exciting. I just want to jump up and down. This is so exciting. This is $3 million that we're spending on our community to make it better for the people that live here, as well as our tourists, but mainly for us. So this is so exciting. And for the first year, this includes open space. So I hope that you're as excited as I am, and I'll try not to cry.
So is that for 24, 25? Like the 3 million is for the 10 years or the?
So I'm each of these are budget years. Maybe Amy will back up a little bit and I'll explain the columns. So that first column was our actuals from 2023-24.
Right.
Then this next column is our budget for the current year that we are in now that ends June 30th, and an estimate related to that. How much of our budget do we think we're actually going to spend? The next column is budget 25-26. That's the next fiscal year that we are actually working on budgeting right now. And this is the one that you are approving for us to be able to roll into the city manager's budget.
Okay, and that's the 3 million.
That is close to, I think it's that 2.829.
Okay.
is our budget that we're planning for next year.
Okay.
Can you give us some context why you're getting emotional about this? Like,
Well,
we
The
understand. I'm
context is,
excited because you're excited. I just-
no, okay, so the context is, and it's not just because I like to cry at numbers, because I don't. The context is as little as 4 years ago, none of this was available. All of the funds from BBB Recreation were going towards our day-to-day operational expenses. And they were just escalating year over year because of cost increase, labor increases. And there was getting to be a smaller and smaller portion of this BBB Recreation Fund that was available for any sort of project. So what Amy and I were able to request and got approved a few years ago was for them to cap those general fund transfer, those transfers out from here to general fund that pay for Parks Rec open space daily operations. And in doing so, that started to create this capital fund that we can now program. So I think it was 4 years ago, Amy, is that right? That we were able to do our first 5-year plan?
Yes.
With
I'm excited.
projects,
And I
like,
kind of knew the answer to it.
that's, yeah, I know, and because you were here,
Yeah.
you were here, and Amy, if you scroll, I'm not sure if it shows up on here very much.
That transfer.
That transfer out, if we can see that on the left, so see that transfer out to the general fund, you can see that that's a pretty flat number. And that was the huge change. Yep, yay. The other reason I get emotional is because this is the first year with open space, as you will hear. For years, we have struggled to figure out a way to start paying for open space projects without them all being grant dependent or requesting funds from the general fund to pay for them. This is the first year that we're finally able to do that. Okay,
Quick question to clarify, you said this is the first year, and prior to that, you also said it's the only year that open space is included in that, or did I hear that?
this is the first year that we've started with that open space is available to have these funds spent. They have a 10-year plan for now, which we will go over.
How long does that cap on the transfer out last?
It's through the 10-year plan.
When is the operating line? The 10,000.
10,400.
Yeah.
That is, I think that those are fees that we pay to the Department of Revenue for the privilege of them collecting our taxes for us and paying us back.
Yes.
No sarcasm. Okay, so the next exciting part is that we have put together for your consideration this 10-year plan, and we are meeting our minimum fund balance. So what that is a 20% policy reserve that, if you want to scroll down to that, maybe.
Yeah, well, I kind of want to hang here because it's got some of the individual items that are capital, and then the totals for capital.
Okay,
If that's okay.
I wanted to explain minimum fund balance, and then can we come back to it, or you want to do it now? Let's do it now.
The minimum fund balance. There you go.
Yeah, so the bottom 2 lines, minimum fund balance, I'm sorry, it's at 10%. That's the amount by city policy and council approval that we want to keep in reserve at all times. It's not a slush fund. It's not there for us to dip into. However, if we had to, we could go to council and ask for something if there was an emergency. And then that line at the bottom, over or under the minimum, just shows you how much capacity we have. And then that is broken down in those boxes above under future uses where it says ongoing capacity or one-time capacity. When Anne first brought this 5-year plan to us, we had a lot of capacity that we have programmed out. And that's why you see no capacity now, if that makes sense. So how could I say that better? Because you look confused. So the first version that we saw of this plan was probably 3 months ago. And it showed that we had an ongoing capacity of $400,000 every year, which means throughout the full 10-year plan, there's $400,000 each year that is available. And we had like a 1 million or something one-time capacity. What one-time means is that is funds that you could spend one time, but it's not available every single year. You can imagine that ongoing, if you think about it, is a lot harder to come by than one time. One time is like a shot in the arm with a grant, like that could be a grant match, and the project is built and it's done, and the next year you don't have that money anymore. Ongoing means it has to be available every single year for them to call it that. So those funds are pretty hard to come by, but that's how you fund positions or labor increases, minimum wage increases, salary increases. We are under a pay for performance merit system, so it pays for all of those things. So since we had such great capacity, that's what we used to program the 5-year plan that you're getting ready to review. Okay, so those are the funds that we used to create this plan. Hopefully that makes more sense. Okay, let's go back up to what Amy was showing.
Sure.
So the way that we have set up, and this has been working really well. So when Parks and Recreation was finally able to create their first 5-year plan, we, Miss Amy Hagan over here was brilliant enough to come up with this item called deferred maintenance, which you will see is $200,000 ongoing every year. What we're able to do with this fund is just that deferred maintenance project. So it could be surprise facility repairs, like you can imagine this place or J. Lively activity center, the ice rink. Any repairs to those places are pretty expensive, and we had no way to fund those previous to this. This has also, we've been able to use this to fund replacements of scoreboards that have been needed. What else?
Some other things that we've done, over time, drawing a blank.
Yeah.
We've done some water fountains and replaced a handful of them, I think 1 year, maybe in upwards of 6 or 10 in our park grounds, the refillable water stations. We've done some improvements, sometimes even, we purchased a piece of fleet the first year. It's a specific field groomer for our athletic fields. And it's saved us on the back end hiring a contractor to do that annually. So we've been kind of picking and choosing what makes sense for daily operation in all 4 of the sections.
So same thing for play structure replacements. What happened about 20 years ago was the city, I think, got a big grant. They replaced like all of our playground structures at the same time. They're all coming due. We can't find replacement parts, and we can't replace all of them at the same time. So Gino, I forgot to have you all do introductions. I'm sorry. We'll come back to that in a second. Gino over here is our parks manager. He and his team have been able to prioritize like the worst condition, and we're working those in with this money over time. You can see that's also ongoing funding. And then we get into our capital improvement plan, and this is what we're going to go through the projects for you in more detail, but this is a roll up of those numbers and how it's broken out. You can see that open space starts not this next fiscal year, and we did that on purpose, but the following year, you'll start to see where those projects are getting plugged in. And then if you wanted more detail on those transfers out, from BBB Recreation, we transfer out for foots maintenance, parks operations, and rec programming. And you can see that that's how that rolls up to what is capped moving forward. Okay, if we could please take a pause and do some introductions, because now we're starting to get into the fun stuff. And I want to make sure you know who all is talking to you. And so if we could just start over here, Sharon, that would be good.
Parks and Recreation.
I'm Molly Joyce. I'm a member of the Open Spaces Commission. Aaron Norton, Open Spaces, but also on the planning and zoning.
Bruce Fox, Open Space.
Ina Wallen, Open Space. Jackie Thomas, Chair of Open Space.
And if we could pause there and copy any.
And Rizzo Scribe.
Austin Kerr, co-chair of this Commission Parks and Rec.
Joe Christensen, Parks and Rec.
Josh, Parks and Rec. Neil Fraser, also with Parks and Rec.
Amy Hagan. Everything Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Events.
She's our assistant director, in case you wanted to know the exact title.
Haley Reynolds, I'm the Events and Marketing Manager for Pros, plus athletics, and I manage athletics.
Yeah, and I'm Robert Wallace, I'm the Open Space Supervisor.
I'm Tyrone Johnson, I'm the recreation manager. And Gino Leone, parks manager.
And online, Autumn,
Autumn Layden McLeod, Parks and Rec.
are there any other commissioners online? And then, of course, our wonderful council liaisons, you've heard from them. Would you like to introduce?
David Smith, City Council Liaison to Open Space. Thank you.
And Councilmember Garcia, are you still here?
Anthony Garcia, City Councilman Liaison for Parks and Rec. Thank you.
Thank you all. So as you can see, it takes a team, and you will hear from all of us as we start to get into these projects. And with that, I think let's just start going through, and let's focus on the first few years. When we get to open space, we can review the whole 10-year plan. But this is also an opportunity for Parks and Rec commissioners to hear about where we are with the current funding and the next couple of years. So I'll turn it over to Amy.
Since I'm still driving on the screen, I won't go stand up at the podium if that's okay with everyone. The very first project, which is funded right now this fiscal year, plus has additional funding next fiscal year. It's a large capital project for our park section. It's the sport courts at Bushmaster Park. Collectively, the funding balance for it will be $1.9 million. Significant upgrade. What's included in that are 2 brand new tennis courts, 2 brand new basketball courts, and 8 pickleball courts, and all lighted. And it includes the demolition of what's out there existing today. In roughly about 1 acre of Bushmaster Park that in total is a 20-acre park. So we'll be performing a construction project out there that will impact a small portion of that well-used park. So that's the first project there. And you see 3 numbers there. That first number, the 67,000 and change, that's what we had expended to date. That was on the design of construction documents for the project. Then you see this estimate in the line item for fiscal year 24-25 to date, that fiscal year, for a little over 853,000. Then you see a new line item that's an additional for this next fiscal year, which begins on July 1st, where we're adding almost 980,000 to the project. So those 3 numbers collectively is what gets us to the 1.9 million for that large project. Any questions on that one? I know our Parks and Recreation commissioners have heard a lot about that project over time.
Do you contract out all of that, or is that done by the city?
The construction drawing part. The construction drawing part, we used one of our on-call landscape architecture firms, And then they subcontracted with an engineering firm that's gonna do all the earthwork part of it, if you will. There's also an electrical sub-consultant on that since the cords aren't lighted. So all of it done by professional design services that create the construction drawings for us. Then we do send it out to bid, and then we award it to the most responsible bidder on that. And I will be going to city council seeking their approval on that, hopefully here soon in April. To begin construction as quickly as possible. Yes,
And just since I'm fairly new to the commission, what pieces of infrastructure at Bushmaster are being replaced with this new?
are being impacted.
Yeah.
So what exists out there today are 2 tennis courts and 2 basketball courts. They're both dual striped for pickleball play. So, and right, with that dual striping right now, that provides for 8 temporary pickleball courts. So it's a demolition of those 2, replacing those 2 plus adding 8 pickleball.
Sweet.
Yeah, great question. Yes.
Although this is capital, this is back to deferred maintenance. How do you plan with these at 1.7 million addition? What is your mechanism to ensure that there's money allocated for operation and maintenance?
For maintenance?
Yeah.
Another great question. So this particular capital project, we already have maintenance on the existing courts. What we don't have, Commissioner Fox, would be maintenance on those brand new 8 courts. It's not going to be significant. It's going into an existing park. It's very similar maintenance to what occurs adjacent to it today. So I don't even think it'll add an hour a week to our current operating and maintenance plan for that park. So, but something brand new in a brand new location does impact our daily operations.
Which you're getting ready to talk about.
Yeah, so were you listening to our speech on this game?
We don't want to add to deferred maintenance.
That deferred maintenance, go ahead, Rebecca.
Well, we take into account, as you just heard, like how much the O and M is gonna be. For the most part, I will tell you that we are trying to work it into our existing capacity as much as possible, even with these new projects that you're hearing. If we were adding a whole new sports complex, say a girls softball little league complex, which would be amazing. If we were
Yes.
adding something like that, we would probably need to request some additional labor to help and materials and supplies to maintain that. But for the most part, right now, we're trying to manage with what we have.
Thank you.
Excellent questions, though, because it leads us into this next project, which is listed again for parks or park sections. It's called the West Side Park. It's about a 5.5 acre park on the west side of town. If you're familiar with the Staples commercial complexes off Woodlands Village Boulevard, and then I-40 kind of runs perpendicular to that. There's vacant land, and that's always been zoned public facility PF for a future park. We finally have funds to develop the park. That the funds on that total between a few fiscal years, 1.51 million to develop that park. So that is for the design of the park. So those creation of the construction documents plus full delivery on what's drawn on that park to develop those 5 acres. It's a current project ongoing. Our team working with consultants on that, again, with on-call landscape architecture firm that we have available to us at the city. We did perform neighborhood or localized community outreach. There's a few large residential subdivisions near this space. So we performed that outreach throughout the summer and in the fall, including even an on-site visit so people could come out and feel what does this space really feel like. There is an existing foots and urban trail that goes through the property and goes underneath I-40 and connects to another subdivision with University Heights. So we also included that neighborhood for those that wanted to participate. We really wanted to hear from the neighborhood, what do you want in your park? we don't feel like that us sitting here at these tables should decide what goes in your park. What do you all want in your park within reason? It's that particular 5 acres is not the ideal place for a giant softball complex, right? But it is great for a neighborhood classification of a park where it's gonna have a playground structure. It's gonna have a ramada picnicking areas. It has an existing trail. So we wanted to find out from the community what else they wanted. They really, those that participated create a really, I think we've got a really neat future park coming forward, with some amenities that we don't have in our current park system. So we're really excited to see this one come through. It's full steam ahead. We're getting ready to go to the city's design review process for this. It will not go to planning and zoning because nothing changes on the zoning of it since it's already zoned PF public facility, but we do honor our design review process at the city and want to ensure that we follow that just like any other development. And then we'll also send that project out to bid, award that project with, that will also be an item in front of city council to approve for that contract. And then we'll start construction and develop a new park for our community.
What are the items that aren't in the other parks that you're excited about?
That we don't, that have been suggested. One is the ninja course, yes, which is kind of I mean, gosh, folks have seen like these ninja shows and stuff. Well, there's actually play structures that can be used for exercise, for active adult, for seniors, for teens, you name it. So that could, we don't have that, that could be unique to offer. A smaller bike track, not really a pump track, but a bike trail, because there's a lot of terrain to this property. So we don't have that in any of our park system today. We also created some Zen kind of spaces, whether if it's some posts to clip hammocks to, hang out in a hammock if you want, or post to clip a slack line to, instead of attaching that to trees and possibly damaging the bark around trees. That community and neighborhood wanted a bark park. So there's a small bark park there, of which we don't have, we only have 2 in our entire system. One at Fort Park and one at Bushmaster Park. So that is what the community wanted. And then again, some of the typical spaces. There's also not reclaimed water to that part of our city limits. So as staff, we didn't feel good doing grass because then we'd be using potable water to create a green grassy space. So it's going to be one of our, we do have some artificial turf outside Hal Jensen Rec Center, but it'll be an area where we'll have some artificial turf also, which does put a different maintenance lens on it for Gino and the rest of the parks team. And this is adding 5 acres to maintain to our current acreage that the team maintains. And so as Commissioner Fox, you were asking, this is going to be something new. We're adding it. It's not going to be the easiest thing just to bring on in, and we'll figure that out without increasing our operating and maintenance fund balance just yet. We'll maintain it somehow. You were speeding up. Okay, next is Heritage Square restroom. Through the prioritization exercise a few years ago that our Parks and Recreation Commissioners did, this was one of our top 5. And there's a restroom off an alley off Heritage Square. It is it's within the envelope of the Hopi Trust building, if you're familiar with that. And so this is $250,000 to renovate, remodel, figure something out with that restroom there. That's why we all laughed about the restroom percolating to the top for Open Spaces Commission too. It's an important piece of just life. So that's what that one is. Our teams recently turned that over to our engineering capital project management team to ask them to deliver this project for us. Since, as you'll see, we have a bunch of projects to focus on anyhow. That is that one. Also still funded right now, it's just on hold, would be Ponderosa Park. That's over in our Sunnyside neighborhood, just north of Killip Elementary, if you're familiar with that. And unfortunately, the park was impacted with the floodwaters as a result from the museum fire a handful of years ago, and we're waiting to remodel it until the suite of stormwater improvements are complete. in that area, which is coming soon. So that project, once those are complete and the timing fits in well, we'll be performing some outreach to the neighborhood to find out what does the neighborhood want in this reconstructed existing park, since we have that opportunity. Moving into recreation, you'll see Hal Jensen HVAC in the gymnasiums. Hal Jensen rec centers are youth center in Sunnyside. Yeah, there's not AC in the gym. So this would be in order to add air conditioning, to create that air conditioned space inside the gymnasium. It's a heavily used full-size gym and it deserves AC. Especially with the youth playing in there. You'll notice that there's one column there that says $100,000 and the column to the right says 150,000. And working with Ann, our accountant, we, with some of that one-time capacity funds Rebecca was talking about, we bumped it up. Things keep getting more expensive. We felt good about bumping that up. And right now, myself and Tyrone Johnson are working with a professional design firm that happens to have a mechanical division. So works a lot with HVAC, plumbing, electric to design this for us. And then we would, out of that 150,000, be able to pay for the construction drawings. Plus also, we're hoping to install the conditioned space inside the gym at the very least. There's other parts of that rec center that also do not have AC. And we'll see, we'll get as much as we can with that. I'm gonna keep cruising along. Thorpe Park Annex. And then you see in parentheses the acronym ICCC. That is the Indigenous Community Cultural Center. So, gosh, a little over, almost 2.5 years ago, the pros division went through a large community outreach for the space at Thorpe Park that used to be the city's former public works yard. A little over 8 acres. There's a stone building on site that is historic, that remains, that was adopted and worked with city council and became the future Indigenous Community Cultural Center. So that's $200,000 to be identified for that project. And what will it be? We'll see. We're currently in a procurement process to identify an Indigenous partner who will work with us for that space. And we really want that partner at the table before we identify and program that $200,000 and how that's used. That, I'm not gonna kid around, that $200,000 is not gonna renovate that building. It's gonna take a lot more money than that, but this is a good start. And how do we wanna program it?
How are you finding the Indigenous partner?
It's through a statement of qualifications. So that was issued, there were responses, and those of us on the evaluation team, we completed our evaluations last week on, I believe it was Thursday, either Thursday or Friday. So it's still in a live procurement process right now.
And for clarification, are these individual partners or a group entity that's a partner?
What was in the statement of qualification or that request thereof was that the partner be nonprofit or the group or whomever have experience in working with Indigenous initiatives like this, have experience in fundraising, have experience in knowing the operation of a future Indigenous center. Good.
Just, I remember that survey that came through a couple of years ago about what do you want the park to look like?
Mm-hmm.
And how all these different sort of, I'm guessing this is the group of people that were involved with that. So like, is this a result of some of the feedback you got from those
It
surveys?
was more a result of what city council.
Oh, okay.
We
We had input, but
Yeah. No, I just wondered, like, there's that whole public input that
There
you
was.
asked about.
so that city council picked ultimately.
Okay.
And they did, and they adopted a concept design. And that's where it was identified for that building to be this future Indigenous Community Cultural Center plus other amenities of that 8+ acres. And it's just a conceptual design at this point.
Yeah, no, I just wondered what happened to all of that, but it sounds like something happened.
Yes.
Happening, I would say.
Well, that feeds right into the next item.
It does, so I'm gonna have to hurt your eyeballs and scroll out to the proverbial right, so it's Thorpe Park additional project. we're gonna go out a few years, but you're gonna see $5 million. A handful of fiscal years total, but through this BBB recreation fund balance and this special revenue balance, we've identified 5,000, not for the Indigenous Community Cultural Center, but for the surrounding area through that public outreach.
5 million.
5 million. I said 5,000.
That's what I
Looked up.
But that's in,
Nobody.
that's in years 20, 31, and 32, and 32,
Correct.
33.
Yes, so 6 and 7 years from now.
And I'll let you know, part of our strategy with this is that, and showing it on the 10-year plan is important because 5 million is not possibly gonna be enough to complete the full concept plan, right? So what we're hoping is council will be able to know and see that this is planned in years 2032 through 34. We can start to think about grant cycles. We can also start to think about bond cycles and if a ballot question might be appropriate to help plan for the build out to partner with these funds. And knowing that we have funding available already should help with a more positive. So you'll see that in a couple of these.
After that one, beginning this July, so this upcoming fiscal year is 1.5 million for what's called the Cheshire Park expansion. Cheshire Park's a neighborhood park on the west side of town. And there's an expansion piece there, again, roughly 8 acres. Somehow everything's magically like 5 or 8 acres of future park space. And what we would like to bring forward to the community is a public running track, because there is not one, and we are a very large running community. And what fits perfectly inside a running track, a multi-purpose field. If you think of any high school or collegiate type environment. So that is what is proposed to occur at Cheshire Park there. So that's along 180, just kind of sandwiched in between Northern Arizona Museum and the Cheshire neighborhood. So we are currently working on that project right now, working through some of the design and specifications that our community would like to see on a running track and multi-purpose field. And next, in a few fiscal years, is what is called the Continental Park expansion. Continental Park, it's a regional level park on the east side of town. There's an existing Continental Park today where there's 5 Little League fields, 4 for boys Little League, 1 for girls softball. And there's about 84 acres extending to the north toward I-40, and the Open Spaces Commission knows what's exactly on the opposite side of I-40 is Picture Canyon. So we have a really cool, I think, opportunity here to really deliver something very neat for the community. What we have identified, however, is only $3 million over 2 fiscal years. And what staff would like to use that for is design of a girls softball complex directly to the north of the current Little League complex on anywhere from about 15 to 16 acres. And so then there's plenty of more land as the crow flies toward the north to I-40 and then to that connection with Picture Canyon on that underneath I-40. So that's just 3 million. Should definitely get us design of that park, maybe a little bit more. See what happens on that one.
And then in the out years on this one, we also have, and so same strategy, we've got 3 million funded. In the future, again, hoping that knowing that this money is out there and available, that we can leverage that with other resources.
And sorry to scroll here on everyone, so we're gonna go down to the next page. Here you go, Robert. You ready? You want me, Robert, to scroll to the first thing and,
Yeah, you can just go and swear.
okay.
Yeah, I just want to echo that we're super excited to be here, and I know it took a lot of work from these commissions and from staff to get this portion of the BBB fund allocated for open space projects. So we're super excited to be able to talk about this. I'm going to keep this super high level. We weren't able to fund all the projects that the commission reviewed. we funded, you'll see 7 on this list. It's actually 8 because we did wrap in one of the projects into one of these other titles, which I'll tell you a bit about. And this is over the next 10 years. So the chart is in the order, I think, more or less of importance from the open space prioritization activity that we did. Though the order of the projects, when they will be implemented, will be different to allow the funds to build up to support various projects. This spreadsheet was submitted to our budget team so we can start moving forward on projects, though I think, as I understand, there might be an opportunity to revise it if we need to during the next budget cycle.
Like a year.
Okay, so the first one that you see on there was the top priority of the Open Space Commission, that's open space acquisitions. This would be funded in year 2029 at $800,000. It's not a lot of funds, but this would allow us to kind of move forward towards implementing an open space system. We might be able to use these funds to leverage like a grant application for one of the top priorities that the commission has outlined. The second, number 2.
Before you move on, Robert, we have a question and then I want to explain that there is a strategy behind where we place this.
Like acquiring more open space, just like.
Yeah, part of our goal is to have distributed open space throughout the community.
Okay.
And we share the same goals, parks, the 10-minute walking access time. So this would help support and implement that.
So it might not be necessarily another 300 acres, right? But it might be connections between, to help us connect our open space system. As Robert said, the open space system is a project that we're constantly working on trying to implement and provide those connections so that our entire community can have that benefit.
Do you have any in mind?
Oh, yeah. We have a
Oh, yeah. Would you like, can you tell us those, or is that like?
We're working on the remaining 2004 bond fund priorities. There is some funds in that. Those are for foots, connections and alignments, but we're working in tandem with Martin. The major corridor that the Open Space Commission identified is the Hoffman King corridor, which would connect the I-40 wetlands down with the Forest Service through some
It's in the
private property.
JW Powell area.
Okay.
And then Amy mentioned the Cheshire Park. We would love to connect Picture Canyon down to Cheshire Park.
Continent.
Yes.
I was gonna say, that's.
Yeah, that'll be long.
Cheshire to where?
Continental to Picture Canyon. To the north. So up underneath I-40 and Route 66. So that's another a corridor that we'd like to secure.
So the Open Spaces Commission prioritized those and council has approved those. So as opportunities come available for negotiations and conversations, we're talking with them regularly. Robert meets with our real estate manager every week, something like that in Martin. And they're just constantly trying to figure out like which one is
Who's our real, I'm just curious, who's the real estate manager?
first Stody.
Stoke.
In terms of the strategy as to when we put this out in 28-29, Robert mentioned that we are still trying to spend down those 2004 bond funds. We want to get those done first, and then this would be new money to start to reinvigorate that program for acquisition. We're also, my hope also is that we will continue to have new capacity available as we continue seeing great BBB revenues that perhaps we can add to this fund.
Number 2 project there is the Picture Canyon restroom. This did come as the top priority project for the Open Space Commission. It is interesting, some of the feedback that we got from stewards, it did fall a little further down the list. And also, like when we entered this into the BBB fund project list here, it came out a lot higher cost than we first anticipated at $1 million. So if the commission was interested in making like a revision to this next year, this could be a project that we maybe could think about maybe we don't want to spend $1 million on a bathroom Fisher Canyon. But this is funded for year 31, 32 in this plan.
A lot of the cost associated with that, there's no water or sewer nearby.
There is, but it's uphill.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
convenient to connect to.
Yeah.
So that's also part of the strategy in putting this out where it is. We're thinking that there might be some new developments coming through that might improve that infrastructure so that we don't have to pull it.
That's actually what I was gonna ask about. I do remember talking about and approving some things nearby. I wonder if they would be kind enough to let us tap in.
We also have in mind, like, if we're able to establish a new trailhead closer to the Route 66 area, not necessarily up where the main trailhead is now. Maybe that's a better location. Like, this gives us time to let all of those things come to fruition and figure out the best use of the city's taxpayers' dollars.
I also noticed on here in the newsletter that you put in our packet, trail usage and the Fisher Canyon trailhead is one of the higher used areas.
Yeah, that and Buffalo Park are very popular.
Yeah, and the project that Rebecca just mentioned is in the 2004 bond fund, and that is like securing a foots connection to Fisher Canyon or Route 66. That's also in this project. I'll get to that in a minute here. Number 3 is the McMillan Mesa Trail Rehabilitation at $150,000. This would be funded fiscal year 26, 27. So this could give us a real early win. And it would be a project evaluating the trails, working with parks and trees from repair and maintenance from that system there. The fourth one is the Fisher Canyon Foots Connection. This $200,000 project. This is the project where we wrapped in the spur that went onto the petroglyph panel, Locust B. And so it would be working to build that Foots Connection that would come in from Route 66 along a couple private parcels and the county's parcel to connect to the trailhead. And we're working with those property owners currently to hopefully either acquire some of that land or to establish an easement.
And that's fiscal year 27, 28.
Yes, yep. So that's relatively soon. I'm moving pretty quick. If you have questions about these, just let me know. Observatory Mason Trail Plan. This, I think, is a great project to fund. It came in up important to the Open Space Commission. We've been working on that plan forever. We are hoping to take that to council in April. This would start to be funded in 28, 29. This project also, when we sat down and looked at some of the details, and did come in a lot more expensive. This project is something that could be supported with grants, and the sheet does reflect that as well. But it came in, I think, it's only 4.5 million. But it is meant to be like implemented into 4 different implementation phases. 1, 2, 3, and then the long-term planning. So the big project.
So that's the one, just for clarification, that makes me want to cry the most, because $4.5 million towards open space, amenities and capital projects just for Observatory Mesa, and actually being able to implement a plan that you just approved and not having it sit on a shelf, like, I don't know, to me, that's kind of exciting.
It's mind blowing.
And then the shoulders. Sorry.
Can those allocated funds be used as matches for grants?
Absolutely. So thanks for bringing that up. It's kind of hard to see without scrolling back and forth and giving you a headache, but you can see that those other numbers in that column, like under the $1 million, we had 250,000 and 750,000. Those are grants that we're hoping to get. Yeah.
When you say grants, are you talking about federal grants? Are you talking about?
It'll all be what's available at the time. So mostly state grants, and we've been very successful with state parks and trails grants. If a federal grant is available at that time, that'd be awesome, depending on how we prioritize it with parks projects. But I think this is probably looking at state funding.
Then number 6 is the Schultz Creek Trailhead. We allocated $800,000 to this in year 32, 33. That likely will not get us to like a fully established trailhead, but we wanted to allocate at least a portion of what we might need to move that project forward, since it was an important project to the commission. We are currently working with real estate to complete the property trade that would be necessary to move this project forward.
I have a question.
Yep.
Oh, we go back to where there's those matching grants for territory Mesa Trail Plan. $1 million is allocated.
Yeah, if you're wondering about the math, I just figured that out myself.
Yeah, I'm wondering why isn't it 2 million?
Go ahead. So so over the years, as you can see, the roll up is on that final column on the right. So the 4.5 million is the total over those 6 years. That includes 750,000 that we're hoping to get as grants. So the city BBB rec funds going in to this would be the 3.75 million.
Gotcha.
Does
So
that help?
those are the 250 and the 750 are
Roll up to the 1 million.
they're all in a line.
Yeah, no, I had to look at that again too. Thanks for the question.
And then the last project in this list is the McMillan Mesa property restoration. This would evaluate the property to determine property restoration areas, and it would be working to eradicate invasive weeds and high infestation areas. Seeding, and it would also work on completing erosion control and high use areas, particularly the slope above Isabel Street that we get a lot of mud that kind of washes down from Mesa into the neighborhood there. And that would be funded at $168,000 in 29-30 fiscal year. And then there are 2 other projects that were in the top category that the commission ranked. I just wanted to mention the Picture Canyon signage and the fencing for Picture Canyon. And we've been talking internally about like maybe being able to fund those with deferred maintenance.
And then when we throw, this is fabulous, thank you. But when we're new at spending money, we've never had any, and so we might have to.
They were in the same situation 3 years ago.
Well, you've got some experience, but we have volunteers who do a lot of work on the open spaces, and I'm just wondering, like, when we're having a conversation about implementing the Observatory Mesa Trail Plan, where do we calculate in the maintenance? Like how does that work for open space? I'm just wondering.
You want to take that?
It's a great question, and frankly, we're going to be feeling it out
Okay.
as we go. So we'll see how much we can implement and build. As you know, we don't have money necessarily for maintenance right now that's not state grant funded or within our $38,000 base budget. And we do rely heavily on those volunteers. I think that'll continue. I'd love to see that expand and grow and maybe even start helping with some parks items too, or at least like invasive weeds in our parks and other areas that the city maintains. But yeah, so besides maintaining foots trails, which our parks team is excellent at, and how many people do you have doing that? Yeah. One person.
That's a lot.
And he does an incredible job with the resources that we have. The types of trails going in at Observatory Mesa are going to be different and a new. This is all kind of new territory for us. So we're going to be figuring that out.
Just as a sidebar comment, the good thing about the Observatory Mesa project is that one of the groups that cares a lot about their access really loves digging and helping with trail maintenance, aka the mountain bikers.
Yeah.
that there was like a standing trail volunteer day like they did for the Forest Service Project Metal, they would show up for sure. This sidebar.
There's something that I threatened a couple of years back with Rebecca, and I ran into a lot of, I just don't have time to do it anymore because I'm on another one, but friends groups are a huge help. I mean, I'm on one for the Coconino County Parks and Rec. That's something that you guys can, our friends group develops a lead poll day on every Earth Day. So, and we have a bunch of volunteers that do stuff like that. So, and if you have enough energy in your commission to create this, that's something that can come in handy. You just have to figure out how to create them. So, and it's hard and it takes a lot of work. I didn't have the time to do it, and I would have
Yeah,
loved to, but
A friends group can be like a nonprofit fundraising arm specifically for, so Grand Canyon has a couple, right? Coconino County Parks and Rec has a friends group, so they can independently fundraise and determine how their funds are spent, and then they can organize either work days or fundraiser events to raise those funds, and we would.
what's awesome about
We
it
would love
is
to have
the
them.
way that the Friends Group was created through Coconino County is basically through the fair. The fair runs its thing, it does its thing, and when they contract out to the person that runs the fair, what the county did was they created this Friends Group that becomes the 501c3 donation pile from all the alcohol sales from the fair group. So when you have all this and you add all this up, I mean, they have an annual operating budget of $100,000. It's now well over $100,000 just from that 25% donation from the alcohol sales. So that's something that, I mean, it's huge because we were able to help build the bathroom at what's the Fort Title. So when you guys get going, that's something else that you can look at because it's not a ton of money, but if you can create an event that starts to develop that kind of revenue, it's huge.
We had our discussion about the 501c3 for fundraising for more acquisitions. Try to brainstorm through that one.
The tricky part is getting funded, getting something that can be consistent every year and funded. The fair was just an easy one for Coconino County. On that Friends Group, we're now creating other different things. There's a disc golf day. There's these other things that we're trying to get going. And we create many more funding opportunities for it. So it's hard, it's a lot of work, and it's unpaid. So it's like, how do you, well, it's.
So we're starting to venture into a different agenda topic, and so I'm gonna stop it there, but it is related in terms of funding. If I could bring it back to wrap up this 5-year plan, what I wanted to show to you all, and Amy, if you could maybe make sure that we can see like these plotted 3 lines that say park recreation and open space, to see that starting not next fiscal year, but the year after, open space will be able to have funding allocated. It just continues to grow. You'll see 3 years that we don't have funds for parks, and that's where open space is getting some good infusion of funding. And then if you scroll all the way over to the right to see the totals, over this 10-year plan, we've programmed 17 million for parks. A wonderful 150,000 for recreation and 7.6 million for open space. And that is how I would love for us to end this conversation. We do have another agenda item, and Tiffany has been waiting very patiently. Thank you. But happy to answer any lingering questions that you might have. Do you feel like this meets the mark, especially Open Space Commission?
I'm just so happy to have it, the money.
Yeah, having very little context, being so fresh, having any amount of funding to provide for these projects that are so important to people is a huge step. Maybe you can provide a little bit of like a quick nutshell of what it looked like maybe 5 years ago to now, just so that it's really.
Or last year.
Or last year.
Yesterday. And that, as you can see, this funding's not even available for another, we're planning for 25, 26 right now. Open space starts in 26, 27, so technically 2 years. Robert, your base budget?
Yeah, it's 47,000, so all of our projects are done with that base budget, and that doesn't include like staff paid. And then, so we do rely really heavily on grants, and I don't think that's really gonna change, because we'll wanna continue to move other projects forward, we'll wanna apply for grants, like, to supplement these projects, so we'll continue to plan for that.
Can you revisit the Picture Canyon signage and fencing that might have been put into deferred maintenance? Is that something?
So Amy, if you can scroll back up in the 5-year plan, so that 200,000 per year ongoing that we've established for a couple of years now for deferred maintenance in our 5-year plan, we would like to, so we've got open space now available for these funds, and we can start using some of these funds for open space as well. So we thought like the Picture Canyon signage project was 35,000 estimated. We think we can fit that in, like planning ahead, we can figure out, and that is a good deferred maintenance item. It's replacing and updating signs that are existing. Same thing with fencing, a little bit more extensive of a project, especially if there's no fencing existing. That might be a different conversation, but if it's repair of existing, especially, we can start phasing in a little bit over time as contractors and things like that are available.
Thank you.
And we can revisit these priorities, correct?
You can, absolutely. In terms of the budget process, this plan, I mean, I say that we need you all to vote and hopefully approve this as presented. If you want something changed within the plan, we wouldn't be able to change it at this point. Maybe I might be able to tell, like if we're swapping some things out or moving some things around, maybe I could beg Ann to help us with that a little bit. But in future years, if we've got major changes, we would need to start talking with you about those in, I would say, November, December. So that when our 5-year plans come out, the initial drafts come out from our finance team, we can start figuring out how to meet whatever changes you would like to see.
I'm just thinking, we'll learn things, and as we go, and we might decide, let's do something else. But
What we did with Parks and Rec, and then pretty much everything that Amy presented on is what we established 3 years ago. We haven't really changed it. This year we updated our budget estimates based on, especially since we've got projects in the queue right now and we're getting some better numbers on that. The rest of this, as you can see, is just really, it's estimates, and it's also just based on what funds are available.
So yeah, what if they did want to, because you said that bathroom budget for Picture Canyon came in higher than you expected. How would they? I mean, how could they make it so that maybe that fell back a couple slots?
So yeah, I think next fiscal year, as we come back to you and start talking to you, like we'll be able to show you our initial 5-year plan as it's coming in. And frankly, we might have a slow year on BBB revenues, and we might have to start pulling back, so those changes would have to be made too. But if we have extra capacity, we can start talking about either pulling something forward sooner or moving things around, if you really think that's a higher priority than what we put in the first 4 years, because you can see like another reason that project specifically is out in the out years is to build up funds to get there while still chipping away at some of the smaller projects. Just honestly to get our own feet wet too.
And this is gonna go forward, but we don't even have a plan to implement anything for 2 years, so. I mean, next year we can talk about how that looks, because we've got the Millen Mesa Trail, we have a plan.
I'm going to put that one first because we kind of feel like that's shovel ready. if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
will.
Yeah, so that, I
We
mean,
have some time to plan that one and get that one.
And that'll be really great to be able to show this money is doing.
right,
We're not just building up capital for something in the future. If you're
spending it.
Pros, our commitment is if you give us money, we will spend it.
sounds like home.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, I would really like to get us over to Tiffany, but we do need a vote on this
So only from open space.
from everybody. And so you could do it separately, or that probably would be the cleanest. If open space would do a vote on whether or not to approve this 5-year plan, and then if Parks and Rec could do a vote.
Can I ask one more clarifying question? With all of the totals on this document. This may be a dumb question.
There's no doubt.
Do they represent what we assessed will be able to allocate out of our funds to that project? Or does it also take into account line items as far as like what we estimate those are going to cost in total, like in a perfect world? Just for
In a perfect world, the two align.
Okay.
So this is based on available funding, based on fund balance and revenues, as well as what we think it will cost us to at least get a project started. And hopefully to, especially most of the open space projects, some of those, we might have a plan to restore 10 miles, and by the time we get there, we can only do 5. But at least we can phase it in and get things started. Great question.
So can I ask for a motion that we accept or adopt the file? Those were reads.
I move that we accept the capital plan as presented for open space.
Oh, right. No, right.
Yes.
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye. Any nays?
Very good. From Parks and Recreation Commission. Have the same motion to approve. I'll do the, whatever, we have a second.
So Commissioner Stackhouse has made a motion to approve the BBB Recreation 5-year plan for Parks and Recreation.
So all those in favor, say aye.
Who was our second?
No, who's?
I second.
All right, got the motion to approve, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays?
Aye.
It's a unanimous motion to approve.
Thank you, everybody.
Now you can cry.
Thank you.
I'll cry tonight when I get home. And now, Chair, we're gonna turn it over to.
So this is item B, land availability and suitability study and code analysis project, last but cap update and discussion. And the discussion is an update on the status of the land availability and suitability study and code analysis project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Tiffany Anton, I'm a zoning code manager. I work in the community development department under planning and development services. And the title of my presentation is actually resource protection overlay. But I'm going to do an update as well on the last cap. So why don't you just hit it and go to the next slide, friend? And also, if you give me money, I will spend it too.
Tiffany, I'm gonna real quick do something. It's transcribing at the bottom of this presentation. So let me, if I can get that to stop,
Like that.
because I don't know why it is.
Resource protection.
You're sharing? That would be, okay.
So I combined 3 different presentations into one for you, because I wanted to give you all of the best of up and coming information, because things are evolving every day. About a year and a half ago, we started working on a project that we lovingly refer to as LASCAP, because if you work in planning, that's all we do is acronyms. LAST stands for a land availability and site suitability study, and CAP is a code audit project or code analysis project. No, you're good. Code analysis project. So, we knew that we were going to be approaching our regional plan, which is the general plan for the city of Flagstaff. We have lots of competing priorities and goals in the city, specifically as of recently in terms of housing and climate. So first up, the land availability and site suitability study. The purpose of that was to understand what was the suitability of vacant land left in Flagstaff. It did go beyond just the Flagstaff boundaries, because we do our planning on a regional basis in conjunction with Coconino County. It did look at our larger regional area. That report is essentially complete. It is available on the City of Flagstaff's website, and if anybody has interest in that, I think it can be of interest to you all, especially as you look towards open space resources and where you could see potential growth happening in greenfield areas. So with that, I point out that study. I will not be going into it in any depth. We are currently mostly involved on our code analysis project, which is intended to evaluate development codes and processes to identify areas of improvement towards our housing and climate goals specifically. It's not to say that those are the only things that are relevant or important, but those are our primary partners within this project. The project has been broken down into 3 separate tasks. The first was what we call a diagnostic report. And essentially, we were identifying what the barriers are to development in terms of housing and climate goals. The second step of the process is where we are today, which is we're generally talking about high-level ways to deal with the highest priorities. There were a lot more priorities or a lot more barriers than we're going to be able to address in our last recommendation, our final code recommendations. It's pretty much a 20-year work program at this point, in terms of all of the things that we could constantly be doing in terms of our development codes. But the reason that I'm here today, and well, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I just wanted to go back and reiterate what the 10-year housing plan goals are. So we do have emergencies for both housing and carbon neutrality. I think it's really important to understand what housing's primary goals are, as well as our sustainability goals in terms of our carbon neutrality plan. So first up, the 10-year housing plan is aiming to reduce the affordable housing need over the next 10 years. So they want to impact at least 6,000 low to moderate income Flagstaff residents through a combination of unit creation or subsidy provision, and then to create or preserve almost 8,000 more housing units by 2031. So those are some fairly big goals. The goal here is to continue to see a minimum of 10% of being affordable. You can go to the next slide. For carbon neutrality, it has 3 primary goals. So achieve carbon neutrality by 2030 through a 44% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, prepare Flagstaff's community systems and resources to be more resilient to climate change impacts, and address climate change in a manner that prioritizes those most impacted and ensures the costs and benefits of climate adaptation and mitigation are equally distributed. Super all easy to solve, right? It's just done in the drop of a hat. So we have some pretty big goals to achieve. Oftentimes it's thought of that both housing and carbon neutrality and the need for both, they find themselves in opposition. And what we're finding is that's not really the case. That we can move forward and we can achieve all of these goals together. And that we have a long list of code concepts that we're working through. And we're also working through in terms of those policies, where's the community willing to, I don't know, it's not really sacrifice, but where are we willing to push the mark in order to get to achieving these goals? And so we're trying to address those high level issues. I'm not going to go through all of those because it would take me an hour and a half to get through that presentation. We have been out as a larger team because there are a team of us working on this project. I do not speak for this project alone. We have been to the Housing Commission, the Sustainability Commission, to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We need to go to the Heritage Preservation Commission, and we have been to council, and we are going back because the presentation and all of the different elements of this are pretty thick and deep. And so we're working on gaining more comprehension of what this project, because everybody loves zoning code, right? Like all day long, you just want to pick up the zoning code and read it. It's not fun. So we get it. We've got some really dense, complicated things we need to get through. We're trying to simplify what all of these things look like. So you're going to continue to see us heading out into the public and talking about this project, but please be aware, we're hoping to have sort of more outward, we're hoping to engage the public in some interesting ways as we move through this, because, you know, it does take a community decision to move this forward. There are always pros and cons to in every which way you can move. And so stay tuned. There'll be a lot more happening in the community on this, but I would pay attention to those larger conversations. All of the reports to date are available on our website, the barriers and so forth. But one of the barriers that was identified is the way we handle our resource protection standards. And so I'm going to dive in mostly into our resource protection overlay, which can be and oftentimes is a big community conversation, especially in terms of parks and open space, because the way we preserve resources often leads to open spaces within our smaller neighborhoods or within individual projects. And so why don't we go ahead and jump to the next slide? This is where so I do want to say that while the code concepts recognized resource protection overlay as a barrier to housing and sustainability, what I would tell you is that that the way in which the code concepts is currently considering, or the ideas that the consultant has presented to us, represent some fairly long-term, in-depth ways of addressing resource protection overlay. We're kind of at a crisis point right now. So staff is in the process of sort of recontemplating where we can go with resource protection overlay. There's a bigger component to resources and how we preserve them that are sole and separate away from housing and sort of carbon neutrality goals. And that has to come, and that is in terms of our public health, safety, and welfare, which is our primary goal with our zoning code, is to ensure those core standards. So you can see that the code concepts came up with some long-term recommendations as well as some short-term recommendations. I'm gonna jump into what the resource protection overlay is, what the purpose of it, what it does, and then how we're thinking we're gonna move forward. So what this is recommending is that in the short term, we look at eliminating density reductions. So really what it is if you're in the resource protection overlay, you lower your density outright, regardless of what we know is on your property or don't know is on your property. So we're talking about changing that, making all properties have the same density within the same zoning district. We also try to preserve resources to the highest degree, and we don't allow resources to overlap. So they're prioritized. If you have a slope resource and a forest resource, there's usually trees on the slope. We take the trees out of it, if that makes sense in terms of the calculation. It just means that extra trees get saved on the site. So the consultants looked at this and they looked at other communities that have sort of similar resource protection. If you look down in the valley, Scottsdale, for example, and some of the valley cities have some similar desert protection. What is unique to them is that all of their vegetation can be picked up and moved and relocated, and that is not the same for Flagstaff. So there really is no other great true example that Flagstaff can jump to and say, this is a program that's working here. This can definitely work for us. What they were able to really focus on was that many of the cities really did very in-depth inventories of what the resources were that needed to be preserved before they created their resource protection standards. We did not do that. We just picked up every piece of vacant land, and I'm going to show you what this looks like in a minute. So go to the next slide. So our resource protection standards, this is the purpose of this section. The division provides standards for the protection of natural resources, including floodplains, steep slopes, and forest. The requirements of this division are intended to maintain natural resources and to ensure that proposed development is consistent with the character of its natural surroundings. Development shall be designed to incorporate native habitat and existing features on site as they provide important visual, environmental, health, and economic benefits. Standards in this division are also protect developed places from natural hazards such as floods. So just really quickly to talk about this, we're no longer living in a world where we are going to protect developed places from natural hazards. We are living in a world where we need to have developed places survive natural hazards. Wildfire and flooding are a natural part of our environment. As we can see throughout other locations, they will happen. We need to design neighborhoods to survive these events. It is no longer about trying to prevent these events. What is missing out of this purpose statement is, again, protecting the public health, safety, and welfare, and that should always be first and foremost in any zoning code requirement. So protecting natural resources are always important, but also protecting our neighborhoods and the people that live in our community are just as important. Go to the next slide, please. You can see here the goals of our resource protection standards talk about preserving those significant natural resources characterized by unusual terrain, scenic vistas, unique geological formations, native vegetation, preserving and enhancing the natural environment, visual character, and aesthetic qualities. Those hit the top mark. We don't get to managing healthy and sustainable forests till we get to 6 to reduce fire risk. But again, we can try to reduce fire risk. We live in the largest ponderosa pine forest that there is. There is limitations to what we can do to actually reduce fire risk. So again, the operation standards have really changed, that we're trying to live and survive. And there are ways that communities can go through fire and survive. So this needs to become a new focal part of the resource protection standards. Our fire department has been reaching out to us probably for the last 2 years, knocking on the door saying you need to do something different. And we don't disagree with them. We just haven't been sure on what is the what and how of how we want to do this. What I want to assure you is that what we often hear from developers, that resource protection standards make development hard. Developers will also tell us that everything makes development hard. So it's not a shock to hear that this makes development hard. We're not doing this to just roll over and make development easier. We want to be smart and consistent, but we also know that we need to generate the science behind how we're moving forward. We know that the way that we're handling our resource protection standards, we're not creating the safest community that we ultimately could. Go ahead and move to the next slide. So as I talked about earlier, everything highlighted in green is in the resource protection overlay. The resource protection overlay was, developed in 1990. We had a land development code at the time. We had been sort of implementing similar standards through rezoning cases or through specific planning areas. But it wasn't until 1990 that we created this actual zoning layer that is the overlay zone. You can see it was just applied to everything that was vacant at the time. Generally, it was anything that was over 5 acres or more. It's not a perfect science. There are some pieces that fell in the RPO and some pieces that didn't. So sometimes people are shocked and surprised when certain developments happen and they just thought because that land had been there for so long that it was in the resource protection overlay. I think the development most recently on Fort Valley Road, people were shocked that that wasn't in the resource protection overlay. I can't explain why it was or why it wasn't. The division, these resource protection standards are supposed, so what I will tell you, what the resource protection overlay did is it just automatically lowered all of the density standards for all of our residential zones. The residential zones carry the biggest burden of the resource protection overlay standards. When they were adopted in 1990, commercial and industrial development was significant for Flagstaff. We have been trying to build a workforce, at the time, we've been trying to build resources for the people who lived here, jobs that make livable wages. The push at that point was if people have livable wages, they will certainly be able to afford housing. But housing was saddled with the largest burden of preserving all of the resources. So in a commercial area, you need to preserve 30% of your tree resources, but in a residential area, you need to preserve 50%. So you can see as times have shifted and changes, our priorities have changed. The percentages work somewhat in terms of forest resources. If you really want to nerd out on what our code does, I will gladly spend all day with you, but I've probably already taken up too much time tonight. But the more important thing to also know is that our resource protection standard for especially our forest resource is meant to implement the Flagstaff our forest management plan. This forest management plan was recently updated. It is available on our website as well. This was updated in December of this year. I will tell you, we have an amazing wildland fire management team. They are on the cutting edge, the smartest of the smart. They know what they're doing, and they are really pushing on us to see some real changes made to the resource protection overlay. Excellent. So what are we looking at? We are currently throwing around the idea, and you really are hearing this first. We plan to be out to council with a work session soon to talk about even the possibility of this, but we want to do a resource protection overlay pilot program. Like I said, we've got to make the science ourselves. We're unique. It isn't like we can take somebody else's standards and just randomly apply them to us and think that they'll work. So we are proposing a limited term pilot program that would allow staff and a developer to pursue alternative methodology to preserve resources in alignment with the purpose and goals of the resource protection standards, which I threw up there for you. We do plan on adding some additional goals, and that is in terms of fire protection. The pilot program would help us inform future zoning code text amendments with proven track record. So we can put our money where our mouths are. So I can stand in front of you and say our goals are all day long, not to mass grade sites and not to clear cut forests. But until you can actually see what it is that we're talking about, nobody's going to know, right? And in a little bit of way, this is going to sound like, just trust me, it's going to be okay. It is going to be okay. The requirements for this pilot program are going to come right out of this forest management plan. So I'm going to dig into a little bit more of this forest management plan, and we can talk about what some of those standards are so that you can actually see that there will be some definable standards. We will be building in guardrails. It will be at staff's discretion with that developer. We'll do this on a contractual basis with whatever developer, but we will not be We will not be holding a developer to a 50% preservation rate for trees or along those lines. We will be doing this differently. So that's where we think that the future of this is going. In addition to working on this pilot program, we want to create a stakeholders group. We want that stakeholder group to be behind the scene making the sausage with us. It's a term my boss uses all the time. So we will have people seeing how and the why that we're making the decisions, and how the project works. And so, we have heard the comments where we want, what often happens is a property is thinned, a developer comes in, they plop down their development, and then we figure out the trees and slopes later on. What this is hoping to do is figure out thinning, but also figure out what are the valuable resources for preservation, and then working with the developer to plop their development down on the site so that they have parameters to work around. So we're working with the resources first and foremost in the development process. Now, wish us the best of luck. That's how it's supposed to work. We'll see. Next slide. So I just want to dig into a little bit of forest management plan. I'm not an expert. They just sort of let me review this and steal their slides for presentations. But the intent of this plan is to provide generalized guidance and planning and implementation of forest treatments. We want to take these forest treatments and go even further and use it towards our resource protection standards. So it's about protecting the community from undesirable wildfire by mitigating or reducing hazards, ensuring forest sustainability by improving long-term forest health, and maintaining wildlife habitat, native plant diversity, carbon storage, recreational opportunities, and other natural benefits. So again, you can see that these are completely overlapping with the goals of the resource protection overlay. Providing standardized resource management guidance to the customers we serve, permitting consistent implementation of standards for all forest management activities within the community. Next slide. So what does this look like? Whether you liked this development site or you didn't, this is just north of Fort Tuthill. This was a site that was previously proposed for development, and it's no longer which is no longer currently on the table. On the left, you see the site prior to its forest treatment, and then on the right, you see it after its forest treatment. So we're looking at what are the large scale implications of how we need to thin our sites differently. How we thin property in 1990 when we started this is so much different to what the right way to thin property is today. I mean, I've seen the science change over time so much. And then of course you can see the utility corridor going through that property. You see it a little bit less, but we're looking at what is a very overly dense forest as opposed to what is more manageable. And then of course from there, additional trees or slope could be taken to accommodate that development. This is how it starts on the larger level. Next slide. One of the things that we're looking at doing, so basal area is the new trees per acre kind of designation. Don't ask me to explain it. I can't explain it to you. They took me out. There's a prism. You look at me. That's not necessarily my field of expertise, but what I can tell you is that they're starting to use LiDAR data in order to determine what that density of trees are on the site. So this is the same site you just saw previously. You can see where that red area, that density, that yellow, and then you can see it before and after the property has been treated and thinned. The good news is that the city of Flagstaff already has this LiDAR data. So this is something that we can work with developers. This is easier than going out and counting and having a surveyor count every tree on a site. It's fantastic. When you deal with a property that's multi hundreds of acres and you have to count every tree, it will slowly drive you insane. And that's why I'm crazy. Next slide. So what does this look like for the built environment? That's great when we're just doing the forest management. I don't think anybody has an issue with thinning or is arguing about the science of what thinning looks like. But once we understand how we need to get property down to a certain density of acre,
We also want to apply these basic principles, which include creating spacing between trees as they move further and further out from development. The primary one we're gonna see is getting trees at least 5 feet away from homes. And that'll be a great place to start. If you're really interested, we do have a tour. I know I promised this to other people and I've got to get going on it, but yes.
This is recognized by insurance companies.
Yes, I mean, to a degree, yes. Are they making decisions on who to cover based on this? Gosh, we're sure hoping that as we make these decisions, that it's gonna help us continue to be an insurable community. Right now, we're not achieving this, and this is a problem. So this is where we would be working with the developer in terms of their study or in terms of what their development looks like. This is how we would be managing the trees. And of course, this is already after we've gone through. So this LiDAR data, it goes all the way down to the ground level. It actually, when you start to see what this looks like, and as we get to council, we're gonna have more data on what that LiDAR looks like, so you can see all the data, all of the different levels that this goes to. But you know, the goal here is that if you read this document, it does all of the things we need it to do. It looks at heritage trees. It looks at old growth first. How do we keep the good pockets of the old growth trees, the ones we know that are the most resistant to fire? How do we maintain a healthy forest and not just arbitrarily collect trees just to meet certain points? How do we save the right trees in the right places? So we're looking at these standards. Next step. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's all I have. And so that's where we're planning on going on resource protection overlay. Resource protection overlay does definitely preserve larger pockets of land within developments. And so one of the things that we're definitely listening to is that 10-minute walking distance to open spaces. And not everybody is going to, I luckily get to live at the base of Eldon, so I'm there, right? But not everybody is gonna have that adjacency to National Forest Service or a large private area. And so how can we create sort of those neighborhoods, still keep our community safe? It might not look, these developments at the end of the day might not look like what we've come up with in recent times, like Timber Sky or Canyon Del Rio, which are developments that you're seeing coming along now. They might look a lot different and might look a lot different than what you're sort of have grown accustomed to, which, to be honest, is fairly dense vegetation. We also want the development. I focus so heavily on trees, but we really want that development to focus on slopes as well, because slopes play just a bigger role in the spread of fire and how we can protect neighborhoods in addition. And so we're looking at smart ways in which we can maybe put the largest lots at the top of the slope, where we have the more dense projects at the bottom of the slope, things along those lines. And we're still drafting what all of this is going to look like in the future. But if you're interested, come on this journey with us. We're going to be trying to do this proactively. We will be looking for stakeholders to participate with us. So if you're interested in like what it looks like when we look at these plans and that kind of thing, come join us. But the goal is like, we're not cutting down every tree at Flagstaff. So hopefully with that. And if you guys have any questions, or if you have questions on the last cap, what else that looks like?
Who's a stakeholder?
Anybody who's interested, really. I mean, I'm a little disappointed Matt's not here tonight, because this is all for Nat. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know who that is, so I'm.
A base level requirement that you are a property owner, or is it anyone?
Anyone who's interested. I mean, we definitely want to keep by stakeholder, it's anybody who's really interested in doing this with us. We definitely want to keep it to a manageable level in terms of like how we can help address, but we want to take those people who most frequently have these concerns about what our resource protection standards look like and help them work through this process with us.
and come up with a reasonable solution.
Go ahead, you go ahead.
You,
No, you go ahead, 'cause I've got to lot to ask.
you have a
About
part
this
to
before.
this one. So I guess on the side of the table, I'm very interested in people, and can you tell us, are you supporting a mixed environment, meaning that you're going to have apartments and townhouses and full houses in this development? Because it feels very concerning in Flagstaff that we have a lot of challenges in integrating mixed neighborhoods that serve better, a larger area of the community. So can you speak to that a little?
Sure, I just love you. You know, I have a love-hate relationship with zoning. It's my job, it's what I do. But as a tool, it really does sort of segregate. And that's the unfortunate side of what zoning is. It does have sort of a little bit of a despicable history, but we'll ignore it for now. We are currently in the process of doing everything we can to ensure that we have the diversity of housing types that we need. There's a lot of concern and interest in single family. There's a lot of perspectives that folks have about single family. I will tell you, as planners in both housing and sustainability, we're very concerned about making sure we have housing that meets all of the needs across the full spectrum. So we have started to try to create code that incentivizes more housing diversity. Again, you know, with current, because zoning code is law and I'm not a lawyer, it's weird how that works out, but you know, we're often put in ways of incentivizing rather than requiring, but the state has really sort of stepped up and created some new housing bills. So you're going to see some movement in this arena. There's a middle housing bill that was recently passed where we need to require duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes in all neighborhoods that allow or that are zoned for single family residential. So that's going to be a substantial change. You know, they've started to tweak how much parking we can require for developments. But yes, overall, I will tell you, within the cap itself, housing diversity is huge. Increasing density is one of the more important goals. That's why the resource protection overlay came up really quickly as a barrier, just because by its adoption, we lowered all of our density standards, which, you know, in comparison with other communities was already fairly low. So there's a lot of work to do there, and that's a big focus of the rest of that code audit process. So I will tell you the big two things that come out in terms of supporting both affordable housing and sustainability is increasing our density and lowering our parking requirements. So it's an engaging conversation, and there's lots that goes around with it, but.
And I would just add on, I mean, obviously resource protection also gets hit in that equation. Question about, as I look at the goals, and I think, you know, everybody's in favor of the goals. Generally, the public, when they notice a development, these are their things that they get upset about when they see a development going in and things, land being disturbed, whether it's state land or private land or whatever the case may be. Yet, when we apply, and when I see you guys apply the resource protection overlay standards right now, it's basically just flood, slopes, and trees. And even those get tweaked a little bit. So like these other elements like unusual terrain and vistas and geological formations and wildlife corridors and habitat, that isn't part of, there isn't anything that we can hold anybody to.
They're all indirect impacts, right?
Right. So will this be part of the consideration in this pilot plan, and how do you address those concerns?
So as part of the resource protection overlay has always had those goals, right? So those have always been the goals. And so those are definitely indirect. I mean, if it's fair, we can say, here are the things we can indirectly achieve, but here are the things we can directly achieve. What I would tell you is that, you know, the reason we've always prioritized the resources is because, floodplains, there's very actual little in our resource protection standards that address floodplains. Primarily, those are all handled through our stormwater management program and are addressed through our floodplain regulations, which are separate from the resource, but each one of those things sort of builds on each other, right? So if you save a floodplain corridor, you're most likely picking a wildlife corridor. They tend to overlap, but not always, right? There's always exceptions. We do try to pay attention to those. But I would tell you, for example, if you looked at the elk movement patterns in the John Wesley Powell corridor, they're everywhere. It isn't one corridor. They move entirely throughout that entire area. Why are they moving there? Because that land is vacant. That's why they're moved. That's, I mean, if you moved up the vacant land, you know, we would also see different movement corridors. So it's always a hard balance. There isn't a way, if we were to take all of these things and make them the priority over development, there would be very little.
That's right,
Yep.
you know, I see the goals and I think, oh, that sounds great, but I mean, I've seen the reality of it.
Yep.
When we look at site plans and when you guys bring these to us and I'm stumped.
We are too. And you know, the list of things gets even bigger all of the time, right? Like it also includes, it talks about rock outcroppings, which we've all learned are also volcanic vents and propose unique challenges to developers over time. She laughs because she used to be my partner in crime on all of this. But yeah, I mean, we have big lofty goals and trying to achieve it all is not always feasible. And some things we're trying to do directly and some things we do indirectly. So maybe that's the fair approach, is to call out what we're trying to directly achieve as opposed to indirectly resolve.
Look, I mean, I'm not a developer, but I guess developing it's to make money. I mean, the developers do it because they make a lot of money. So, and I'm on the Open Space Commission. So, you know, my interest is open spaces, and when I think of development, it would include neighborhoods and open spaces and community corridors. But if you're interested in making money, you want to develop all that. So when we talk about our community developing, why is it possible to offer developers you can also include a resource in this development that's actually going to make you more money, which is that why we have these empty vacant shops underneath these buildings that are going up in height because of the retail space? And in these future developments, is that something that is an important part of developing JW Powell, is having grocery stores and retail spaces, because that's a revenue generating part of the development that might provide more open space because the revenue can be increased in those areas and not just in housing?
Trying to break that down.
I know it's a really big question, but when we develop something,
Sure.
are there alternative sources of revenue for developers so that they leave some open space or give us parks and vistas? And I know you're trying to talk about sustainability of communities remaining. And I'm trying to think about, well, how do they get their money, but how do we also keep our open spaces?
Sure. So we ask a lot. I will tell you this. The development environment in Flagstaff is tough, right? And yes, a developer's goal is to make money, but they're also providing a community resource. So we always look at it in terms of a balance. I don't judge a developer negatively because their intention is, yeah. So with all of that said, we actually put a lot on our developers, right? So when we think about what it is we're wanting a developer to achieve as part of the development process for building whatever project, and we do them big or small, right? So if we're working with a Canyon Del Rio or a Timber Sky, there's always that conversation about open space corridors, foot trails. But when we're working on a 5-acre site, it's a little bit less, right? So there is that management of what size of development. We have lots of infill projects, that kind of thing. And so what is important for us to know is what are the resources we as planners need to work with developers in order to achieve and attain. In some areas, it might be more that we need recreation amenities, where in other places, it's definitely having open space amenities, and the two offer different community values. So we always try to manage that. We always try to work with our partners and trying to provide all of those. But again, in the bigger picture of everything a developer has got to achieve, it's a lot. Right? And so as a community, we also, and I'm seeing all of the amazing work that you're all doing. But development's not going to bring it all, right? So we can't rely on developments that they're gonna do all of the open space preservation or their, right?
No, but I was
Yeah.
just wondering, like, but can you give them something, like, can they get retail space too, so that they, cause that brings in revenue, maybe not.
Sure,
You know,
we
like-
do, I think we do, right now, housing is the biggest money maker that's out there. I think we do everything we can to achieve commercial development, and we want it more than probably we get it. And in terms of lately of commercial development, we're still pretty hot on drive-through restaurants, even though COVID's over. Maybe if our people won't stop going to drive, I'm just kidding. You know, it's hard to control that commercial market. Retail is ever changing, and the dynamic of it, I think as that southern corridor of Flagstaff really starts to grow and develop, we're gonna need additional commercial resources, especially just in terms of grocery shopping. So, I mean, that's hard to condense for you in terms of, are we incentivizing developers? We're trying like heck. And the regional plan is what's really guiding where we're looking for those different types of land uses. Mixed use is a whole different, other complicated conversation. And really, there's only one development anymore that doesn't have commercial underneath it. And it's probably for a different discussion over a beer.
Ooh, now you.
Right? Beer, glass of wine, shot of tequila, you know, that most of those mixed use projects have finally now come in with commercial development underneath, whether it be big or small. What I would tell you about mixed use is we tried something, it wasn't the greatest, we pulled back. We might have pulled back a little far. We haven't had mixed use since. There are some different ways to look at it. We're getting there. We're working on it.
Kind of going off of that topic. With one of the points that you made with reducing the requirement for parking within all of these new developments, how then is transportation being prioritized in terms of, I guess, you know, creating more corridors or alternative transportation options? Obviously, we're building a new transportation hub downtown off of Phoenix Avenue. But then also like, you know, the bus trail and biking. And to Commissioner Keeler's point, like commercial space where there's walkability, not just to green spaces, but to grocery stores, et cetera. Kind of open-ended question, but you know, is there a lot of conversation being had with the transportation department side of things to create better bikeability, walkability, and buses and other forms of public transportation?
Absolutely, of course, 100%. And I would tell you that that's probably going to fall more along the lines in our regional plan and our general plan of where we want to focus density and where we want to see those transportation corridors. Transportation and land use are hand in hand. They're pretty much sisters. They don't go anywhere without each other. So huge, yes. You know, one of the things that the code analysis project is also, so a couple of things that the code analysis project looked at that I didn't address is what are our vulnerable neighborhoods? Why are they vulnerable? What can we do to make them less vulnerable? And then on top of it is there a way to expand areas where we know that we already have low vehicle miles traveled? So where we're finding areas that were already low VMT, and how can we expand on that? So transit oriented design is part of that, all of those things. what I frequently run into in the conversation is it's the chicken and the egg. Right? By the time we want to get approval to put in that housing, we don't have everything we need to support it. Because you need the housing in order to have the transit and to have, like, I expect that there's just gonna be a road serving vacant land. It's just not the reality, right? So it definitely is that chicken and the egg, and there are things that come later, right? You're not gonna get, nobody's gonna invest in the transit line to serve a future possible development. So that's part of the struggle of what we face is how do we do this in a way where we know we can still serve it in the future with transit, but also get the densities and hit things at the right moment. Sometimes there's that uncomfortableness in the in-between of when we don't yet have everything where we need it, but we've got to move forward.
Tiffany, couldn't we also bring in some of our priorities for so alternate forms of transportation by Kate? Like if this is why we're presenting to you as well, like if we can start to bring in like our open space system connectivity and foot trails, and if we can spend those 2004 bond funds for some of these priority connections, like some of that might be able to go in before you're able to get transit out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the alternative transportation master plan,
ATMP,
yes, identifies as those priorities as well. And you'll see even in the Observatory Mesa Trail Plan, we talk about routes that we think could become future commuter routes, and that's why.
I have about, probably at least an hour's worth of questions. I'm not gonna do them right now, but how can we get by? Yeah, over here, I'll buy. How can I steal some of your time?
I am available all of the time. I do nothing else but. I really just honestly email me, reach out. I actually think I live in the same neighborhood as you and see you walk your dog past my house every day. So catch me on my front porch.
Not that you're stopping.
No. But you know, we're here, we're available, we're open to discussing this. I can bring in all of the team players as well. Whatever you're interested in, we're here. We want more people involved. That's why we're coming out. The more people we have involved, active in the conversation, that's our goal.
Okay.
Is to achieve all of the things.
Okay, thank you.
We just went through a massive trail plan development with the public for 3 years. And we wanted everyone's involvement too. And it's really interesting because you're never gonna make anybody happy.
Yeah.
Yes. And now we're all okay with that.
I am really good at making nobody happy, so. All right. Good.
You want to wrap with that?
Sorry. So number 7, city council liaison report, Councilmember David Spence and Councilmember Anthony Garcia.
Both may have departed.
That's okay. Reports, monthly highlights of Parks and Rec.
That's the monthly newsletter.
Yeah, in the interest of time, we don't need to call anything out unless you have questions.
Take a look at the newsletter. It was emailed to you. Informational items to and from commissioners and staff.
Yeah, a couple of items that right. So there was one item that the commission asked for feedback on for open space. This was the in-hall access route through Observatory Mesa. And we did submit our project preliminarily to the State Historic Preservation Office. And they declined further consultation. And they essentially allowed the project to move forward to its next step, which would be, they essentially resolved that it doesn't violate any of the easement or conservation easements requirements. And the next steps are for the property owner to finalize the driveway plans with community development, and then to forward them the final legal description of the road. So once the final legal description is finalized, then we can take a proposed amendment to city council for the amendment of the easement along the alignment that was proposed. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, where we're at.
Thank you.
Potential future agenda items?
For Parks and Recreation, I was going to send an email out with a suggestion for a March meeting.
I have one question for the Open Space Commission. In April, the Aquaplex is going to be closed during the week of our meeting. So I wanted to move it to like a field meeting. So if that works for the commission, we can meet somewhere. If there's a lot of interest for a field trip with Tiffany, we could look into arranging that as well.
Oh, maybe going out to Hoffman Tank.
I thought for sure you were gonna take her up on that beer.
I was gonna start, actually not making another road, but it's not, I want to be professional.
So
Mother Road? No, no. Yes, yes. Okay. Hoffman Tank perhaps for the April field trip to weather dependent, I'm sure. Yeah, backup plan is Mother Road. It could snow. Fingers crossed.
Can we have a joint meeting?
What is
Yeah.
If you're right, one of those friends. Yes, you do need to get out by the one.
And then the other item that I wanted to mention too was rescheduling the Open Space Commission meeting in May and May 28th to potentially May 12th. May 28th is a holiday, so does May 12th work for Open Space Commissioners?
That's for me. Wow. Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, they,
Works.
Works for me. Yeah, for me, but it's fine.
I think if it does not work for you, if you could email Robert.
Yeah.
And then we'll send out more information to let you know what we've decided to do.
Can I have a number? Email Robert. Okay,
Or just let me know after the meeting.
and can I request a motion for adjournment?
so moved.
All right.
Bye. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And we are adjourned.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Good seeing you.
I will be here. Okay, so I'm gonna. Work for a beer.